Nuuspod, onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeel.
Goeiedag, baie welkom by Nuuspod en ek het by my in die Nuuspod ateljee vandag vir Barry Bateman. Hy is die woordvoerder van Afriforum se private vervolgingseenheid. Hy werk daar saam met gekry. Barry, baie welkom by Nuuspod.
Baie dankie, Isak.
Ek gesels met jou vanoggend na aanleiding van ons onderhoud wat ons gister met Nicoleen Swart gehad het. 'n onderhoud wat ongelooflik baie aandag trek, baie kykke kry en baie reaksie veral, maar nie net die onderhoud self, die hele saak. As 'n mens gaan kyk na mense op sosiale media, die reaksie op hierdie verskriklike ding wat die wêreld vol loop, hierdie video van 'n man wat soos 'n bokser staan en 'n vrou slaan. Mense is te bang om dit eers in woorde te sê, Barry.
Yeah, it's an incredibly horrible story that has come to light. And, you know, that reaction that you're talking about there, Isak, is exactly the reaction that we wanted to get from the magistrate in the matter. But unfortunately, the state failed to ensure that that video evidence was admitted to the record and that it was able for the magistrate to actually view it. So, you know, the public's reaction to this is the appropriate reaction. It's one of disgust, it's one of anger, it's one of disappointment, knowing that ultimately the perpetrator of these very violent acts against a woman walked away with a mere 20,000 rand fine.
En Barry, mens wil nie 'n regstelsel kritiseer nie, mens wil nie 'n regter of 'n landdros kritiseer nie, maar hier's gefouteer, is dit nie? Iemand het 'n fout hier gemaak.
Absolutely, and we believe that this lies with the prosecutor in the particular matter. So on the morning that the matter was supposed to proceed, it was set down for trial. The prosecutor didn't even greet Nicoleen. I mean, this is the woman for whom, whose rights he was seemingly fighting for in this particular court to hold somebody accountable. He didn't even greet her. When it came to the sentencing argument, it was, of course, mitigation of sentence first. The defense counsel got up and he made submissions to the effect that his client shows remorse. Further, that his client is undergoing psychological treatment for his anger issues. But no evidence to this effect was presented to the court. And this wasn't challenged by the prosecutor. So the court accepted, without a single report from a psychologist, from any expert, that this accused is going for counseling. That's the one aspect. The other is when it came to the admission of the video evidence, the state got up and said they'd like to bring this application. The defense simply said, we object, we question the authenticity of the record, or these videos rather, how they were collected and handled and so on, and how they ended up to this point. The state, the prosecutor, effectively simply rolled over and said, well, you know, we're not going to present any evidence to prove the authenticity, and we'll accept whatever ruling the court makes. And that's exactly what the magistrate did. He said, until such time that until the state presents anything to prove the authenticity, he's not going to admit it to the record. The state then simply moved on to presenting a medical report and arguing from the bar why the assault was so bad and that the accused should receive a just punishment. But that's effectively it wasn't a very strong case from the state side.
Barry, is daar 'n manier hoe 'n mens nou hierdie ding kan verder vat? Sou mens kan appeleer hierteen, sou mens beswaar kan maak teen die vervolgingsgesag se manier van hantering van hierdie ding?
Unfortunately, as we understand it, and this is the advice I've taken from Advocate Nell, is that this matter can't be appealed. There's very limited scope for the state to appeal in any matter. And it comes down to whether or not there was an error in law. Now, in this particular case, there was no error in law. This was simply a poor case presented by the state in aggravation of sentence. So there are, in fact, no grounds for the state to further appeal this. Now, if Nicoleen or we haven't taken instruction, but if anybody wants to file a complaint against the prosecutor, there certainly are those avenues to take. But we have not received any instructions in that regard.
Ek verstaan daar is 'n spoor van ander klagtes aanklagte teen Jaco Swart en dit kan dalk die saak op 'n ander manier manipuleer en op 'n ander roete stoot.
That's quite right. So over the weekend, Sunday newspapers did some digging into Jaco Swart, and they managed to establish that even just days before he was to go and plead guilty for this assault, he had been involved in 2 separate incidents in Cape Town where cases of assault were opened up against him. I'm not too sure of the status of those at this stage, but that's what happened. What this sentence means for Jaco Swart is, assuming he does get arrested on another charge, for purposes of bail, he'd have to declare his prior convictions. So you'd have to state that would make his bail application a little bit more difficult. But if he is ever convicted of assault, the suspended sentence he received in the matter involving his wife would immediately be lifted, and the 3-year sentence would then be imposed, which would be on top of whatever he gets sentenced for in the matter, the new matter he gets found guilty of.
Kan julle van die private vervolgingseenheid se kant af hierdie saak verder voer op hierdie roete?
No, we haven't taken any further instructions from Nicoleen in this regard. Of course, if anybody requires the support of Afriforum's private prosecution unit, they should of course send us an email, ons vervolg@afriforum.co.za, and we'll consider all those matters. In this particular matter, we had a watching brief. The state had the matter was struck off the roll or was withdrawn, and we got involved, made representations to the Director of Public Prosecution, and it was re-enrolled, and we had a watching brief on behalf of Nicoleen Swart.
As een so staatsanklaer so 'n fout kan maak, dan beteken dit daar moet baie ander sake ook wees waar mense op hierdie manier as dit ware te nagekom word. Sou hulle sulke sake by julle kan aanmeld?
Verseker, people can certainly approach us if there are other instances where there's been failures by the state to pursue a matter. We'll of course have to assess it on the facts and see whether there is scope for our assistance. But it is a concern. I mean, this is not the first case that you would have heard of where criticism has been leveled against the NPA for a handling of a gender-based violence matter. So, where there is scope for us to intervene and to provide guidance and assistance to a complainant, we certainly will. But people must come forward then, send us those emails, and we will assess what evidence is available.
So, net om reg te verstaan, julle kan met ander woorde nou niks verder doen voordat iemand nie die saak verder voer nie. Wie is die mense wat hierdie saak mag verder voer? Wie is die mense wat spesifiek met betrekking tot Nicoleen Swart 'n klag by julle kan lê om dit verder te kan voer?
Okay, no, in the Nicoleen Swart matter, that's the end of the road from a prosecution perspective or a sentencing perspective. There is no further there. If Nicoleen or her family want to pursue a complaint against the prosecutor, that's entirely up to them, but we have not received any instructions to that effect.
Iemand anders wat klagtes teen Jaco wil inbring, dit sal dan nou die normale pad moet loop, gaan maak by die polisie aanhangig en voer die saak dan op die manier verder.
That is absolutely correct. So the case would be filed with the SAPS. They'd have to do their investigations. But of course, if a complainant requires any assistance, we can provide that watching brief, but we just need to get all the details and assess the situation. And much like we did with Nicoleen, we'd be able to provide that oversight in terms of a watching brief.
Barry, net so on the side vraag, as het ware, maar ek dink dis iets om te bespreek, want as 'n mens na die reaksie van mense kyk, Jaco se adresbesonderhede wat rondgestuur word op sosiale media, mense wat dreig om hom te gaan vasvat. Ek weet mense is kwaad en hulle wil dit graag doen, maar dit sou nie baie slim ding wees om te doen nie.
Well, absolutely not. Even just distributing somebody's personal details on social media with what is very clear an incitement to commit violence against the man. That's plainly unlawful, and it's not something we stand for. The very purpose of this unit is to stand up for the law, or stand up and ensure that the criminal justice system functions correctly. Taking your law into your own hands is not only illegal, but it undermines the very functioning of the legal system in the country. So we, of course, stand against that. We advise people not to do that. And, you know, it's just an unfortunate, we understand that people are angry, but the criminal justice system must also take note, the NPA and so on, of these kinds of reactions, because vigilante justice is very much a symptom of a failing justice system, where people no longer have faith in the SAPS and the NPA to handle their cases. They take the law into their own hands. So perhaps it's a wake-up call. The NPA should take note of this. But it's a long-standing thing. We just saw recently people who were lynched down in Cape Town. There was allegation that they'd kidnapped a young girl. It was unfounded, but the community was angry. So again, and I'll repeat it, vigilante justice is a symptom of a failing criminal justice system.
Kom ons gesels bietjie daaroor, as jy vir my nog 'n oomblik kan gun, juis oor daardie aspek, want ons hoor al hoe meer van kritiek teen die regstelsel, al hoe meer mense wat sê die regstelsel is ook maar besig om in te konk soos die res van Suid-Afrika. Hoe dink julle aan daai kant oor die saak?
You referring to the Swart matter, or on this?
In general.
In general. Well, this unit would not have been created if the criminal justice system functions as it should. So, I mean, that's the first indicator. I mean, the Afriforum private prosecution unit was to ensure that everyone is equal before the law, that there's no selective prosecution. And you know, we've taken on various roles in terms of oversight to ensure that the state does its job. So I think that criticism is valid. It's the type of thing that we try to address through our work. So, of course, the criticism that has been leveled at the courts or at the NPA rather than the SAPS for their quite often shoddy work, I think is very valid.
Barry Bateman, woordvoerder van Afriforum se private vervolgingseenheid. Baie dankie dat jy vir ons tyd gemaak het. Barry, all the best for you.
Baie dankie, Isak.
Keep well.
Nuuspod. Onbevange, onbegrens, onbevooroordeel.